But isn't there been, throughout our history, divided government? And you know one thing, I've had a thought for him. Why don't he do what Ronald Reagan used to do? You know what Ronald Reagan used to do and Bill Clinton used to do? He'd call people over to the White House, have them for dinner, have them for meetings, have them for a social occasion. Do you know this president never does any of that?
Well, he played golf with Boehner, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that just turned out for Boehner. I don't get too far afield on that.
He is simply not, there is no outreach to Congress. There has not been. But look, in 2009, he had 60 votes in the United States Senate and overwhelming majority in the House of Representatives. Now he got things done, but he rammed them through on a pure partisan basis. The chief executives that are successful, and there have been, and I'm talking about both Republican and Democrat, are those that get things done in a bipartisan fashion. This president does not do that.
Last point on this. Could Republicans on Capitol Hill be a little more amenable to work with the president? Yeah, okay, if he's difficult to work with, we get that. But we've heard that McConnell has said from the beginning he does not want this president to succeed.
Yeah, but you know, when McConnell said that was in 2009 after the election, and he was talking specifically that he didn't want Obama to succeed on Obamacare. And that has been taken all out of context in my view. If the president, for example, came up with a proposal to bring these corporations back to the United States where they would pay taxes, there's a couple of $1 trillion parked overseas that they won't bring back because of our taxes, that they don't want to pay 35. We have the highest corporate tax rate in America. If he called the Republicans over there and said, hey, let's fix this program, let's get that money back in the United States and build highways and bridges and infrastructure and all that, we would be glad to.
You might be glad to.
Oh, I promise you I speak for my fellow Republicans, yes.
All right. Let's get down to, you mentioned the National Intelligence Director and what he was saying a couple of weeks or so ago. He said a lot. He said that he couldn't recall a more diverse array of challenges and crises. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Remember, the person that said this was a guy named General Clapper, who's been in the intelligence business for 53 years. And he said he had never seen crises like this that we're facing, and more diverse. When you look at China and their aggressive behavior, when you look at Vladimir Putin's behavior in Ukraine, when you look at the Middle East, which is now, we are basically selling out the moderate opposition with this horrible Faustian bargain they've made with Vladimir Putin. We've had a conditional ceasefire while Vladimir Putin, with iron bombs, is bombing hospitals and schools.
Sound like a ceasefire to me.
And now the quote ceasefire is supposed to take place, and I think that you will see fighting continue. But at some point, if Bashar Assad, who by the way was on his way out when the Russians and the Iranians came in, if he's able to consolidate enough geography, then he might agree to a ceasefire. As long as Bashar Assad stays in place, he has his base called Latakia, and he's a major player in the Middle East. That's what he's been able to achieve.
Does Syria simply need to be reformed? Is that a single country that simply cannot exist any longer?
When we say those things, it sounds easy, but then when you get into the details of who would get what part, and where the populations would be, etc., it gets very, very complicated. But here's the fundamental facts. The people rose up against Bashar Assad. Bashar Assad has now killed 250,000 of his own people, driven millions into refugee status. The crisis in Europe today, many observers have said what Vladimir Putin now is dismembering the EU by driving all of these millions of refugees, hundreds of thousands of refugees, into Europe. Already you're seeing the strains within the European Union. Meanwhile, he maintains a major role. Meantime, you will see him start up more activities in eastern Ukraine, and all of it while this president and this Secretary of State seek their favor. It is the obsequiousness of this is unbelievable.
What should they be doing?
What should they do? They should be training the Free Syrian Army. They should be going after ISIS as well as Bashar Assad. They should declare a free zone, no-fly zone, so these refugees would have a place to go. And we should be doing the training and equipment, as I said. And we need to send troops on the ground, about 10,000 of them, with about 90,000 Turks, Sunnis, and other Sunni Arab countries, and take Raqqa. If we don't kill these people in Raqqa, Ted, they are going to attack the United States of America. As we speak, there are people coming out who are committed to committing and trained and ready to commit acts of terror in Europe and the United States of America.
How do we get the Turks and who seem to care more about the Kurds than they do ISIS?
They do.
How do we get the Sunnis who seem to care more about Iran than they do ISIS? How do you get this coalition together when everyone seems like they've got their own particular?
It requires American leadership, and a failure of American leadership is exactly what has resulted in this complex situation, as you just described. Yes, the Turks are worried about the Kurds because of the Kurds' ambition to have their own state. The Kurds are the largest ethnic group in all that part of the world that don't have a country of their own. And so Erdogan is attacking the same people that we are training and equipping. But the worst thing is that Russia is carrying out incredibly indiscriminate bombing against the people, the Free Syrian Army folks, the moderate forces. So the people in the moderate forces are driven to the more extreme Islamic groups like al-Nusra, and that is the classic example of a failure of American leadership. A foreign minister of one of the Gulf states told me, he said, "We believe now that it's better to be America's enemy than its friend." And it all goes back to when the president said the Syrians had crossed the red line with chemical weapons and then didn't act.
Last point on this, Saudi Arabia, they are friends?
They are friends, and they have their flaws. But the Saudis are very necessary right now. They are incredibly necessary. The Iranian-backed group called Houthis were about to take over Yemen. If you look at where Yemen is on the map, it's right next to the world's busiest waterway. If the Iranians had taken control of that, then they would have had control of the world's energy supply. The Saudis had to go in themselves. They're in a hell of a fight, and they're taking casualties. But we were standing by and watching. Just one more item. The American sailors were humiliated by the Iranians in violation of all international rules because they strayed into their waters. It is against international law to board those ships, and they humiliated Americans, putting them on their knees. Huge propaganda, and that's bad enough. But the Secretary of State thanked them for returning it. The President of the Secretary of Defense said, well, no, the Vice President said, this is standard nautical procedure. It's not. It's humiliating Americans.
I can see, and I'll get the emails later, McCain wants to get us into a war. Listen to him, he's saber-rattling.
McCain, I will look my dear friends in the eye. You're going to fight them here, or you're going to fight them there. You have two choices. When the Director of National Intelligence says that there will be attacks on the United States of America, you can believe him. You can believe that Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, is now sending young men in this flow of refugees to attack the United States of America. You can count on it.
We can't leave without what also